Hello, it's Dr. David Hornbook, the Clinical Director of Education and Technology at Keating Dental Arts in Irvine, California. Here again for our weekly podcast. And usually we're in this studio, but we have the distinct pleasure of being at the Island Hotel, an unbelievable hotel, right here on Fashion Island in Newport Beach. And it's a beautiful day, like it always is in Southern California. And we have a guest, been a friend of mine for 25 years, Dr. Ron Jackson, who most of you do know or have seen him lecture, and if you don't, you need to. But welcome.
Well, thank you, David.
Have a good time.
My pleasure.
We were talking earlier about some of the things you're doing now, and
yes,
and you and I go way back doing lectures together, where you were the posterior guy. I mean, you were the only guy, doing with concepts and then directs, and we've had some fun, doing kind of back and forth with the anterior and posterior. So, I know you're doing a lot of fun things now, and one of the things, obviously, is sonic fill, which is your baby, in case our listeners and viewers don't know that, which I'm a huge advocate of, as you know.
Yes.
And I still practice clinically, so I still use it daily, as well as my associate, and I know you do as well.
So it is done very well.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about that journey. In the late 80s, early 90s, you were doing concepts, and you were lecturing on concepts, and concept is an indirect resin microfill that really was way ahead of its time. I still have some of those that are 25 years in the mouth that look gorgeous.
Yeah, they do. They're tremendous.
So talk about your journey from there. Well, how'd you get into that in the first place, lecturing and educating?
Well, lecturing education was a complete accident. It was never a goal. In fact, it's the one thing I've done in this profession that was never established as a goal and a plan to achieve it. It basically happened. To go back to answer your question about how I got into lecturing at all, like you in the early 80s, and I guess that's why we're both still out there talking about the topics we're talking about, adhesion and the so-called aesthetic revolution. But, when the ceramic veneer was first brought out, John Calumet at New York invented that, and it got going, and then Bob Nixon and everybody's teaching these things. Why doing indirect ceramics and smile makeovers and then Buddy Mopper and Norman Feigenbaum just began talking about direct resins when the microfill was introduced, and we could do some direct resins. So these were good complementary materials there. Well, once you improve somebody's smile, they began to ask about the back teeth.
Right.
What are you going to do about these things, these gray things? They're awful.
Right.
We didn't have composites, direct composites. They weren't very good. I mean, the old self-cure, auto-cures types things, paste, you stuff them in there. The particle size were like boulders, so they come plucking out, and we used to call them those plucking composites, And so we just couldn't do anything for them back there except crowns, and you don't want to crown all those teeth just because they got some amalgam fillings in it. So I began to fool around and look for some things, and then, as you know, because you were involved very early as well, Ivoclar came out with this material, indirect resin, heat and pressure cured, which took this composite and just gave it super physical properties of fracture toughness, flexural strength, and wear resistance. Was unbelievable. Wear resistance, just because it was a microfilm. And I thought, well, that's just terrific. So in other words, I was looking for this type of restorative method to treat my patients. Had nothing to do with anything other than serving the patients. And got in early on that. I was like the third person or so to get a system. I had the system in my office. I made them myself.
Right.
And patients were ecstatic.
Right.
I just kept doing it. And I always photographed my dentistry because I wanted to track things, to see how well they hold up over time. You can't do it from memory. You got to have pictures.
Right.
I also began to realize
because if we tried to do it from memory, everything we've ever done lasted and looked good.
Right. That's exactly right. So took pictures, and so I had befores and I had afters, and next thing that I was talking to some dentists in my dental society, he said, hey, we'd like to see what this is all about. Is this stuff anything? So I took a handful of slides, and in an informal study club without any preparation, I showed them around. They said, well, that looks really good, and we'd like to learn how to do these things. Could you put together, technique? Well, okay. So I began to photograph that, and as you know, what's happened is all the next thing I did was a, you might call it a lecture. It was very crude presentation to that group. then another study club, then a dental society, and so on and so forth. And then laboratory groups, because Eva Clark was selling it to the labs, and labs wanted their dentists to learn how to do it, so they'd sponsor lectures. Remember how we used to do a lot of lectures for
Oh,
laboratory?
yeah.
And that was like from 1986, I think 87 when that first started, and when the aesthetic revolution hit in the early 90s, why, everything took off from there with Empress and so on and so forth. But I also got really interested in, I don't know if you know this, David, my background is chemistry. My undergraduate major was chemistry.
Okay.
I came very close to not going to dental school. I always wanted to be a dentist since age 9. But when I got in high school, I loved chemistry and physics. I thought, well, okay, so I majored in chemistry because it's my favorite subject, and then I began to think, well, maybe I'll stay in this. But I changed my mind. I said, no, I've always wanted to be a dentist. Let me do that. If that doesn't work out, I'll go back into chemistry.
Right.
So what's the problem?
Right.
And then when the aesthetic revolution hit, the adhesion began to change. We began to bond to dentin, and that's all biochemistry. And that was my favorite part. Organic chemistry was my favorite part of chemistry and biochemistry. And that got me involved in product development. Mm-hmm. So you know how life is; it builds, and so it's at the right spot, at the right time. And Kerr gave me an invitation to participate in a revolutionary product,
Right.
Not just an improved. Dentistry moves towards better and better and better,
Right.
but this was an opportunity to revolutionize the way things were being done and to develop a posterior composite completely different, unique in that it is intended strictly for posterior use, and it has. It's changed.
Well, it's a
completely.
great product. And for those that are listening or watching, if you don't know what Sonic Fill is, I mean, be sure to look. It's a Kerr product, and it's actually a composite that it's in a little compule tip that you put on an ultrasonic handpiece made by Cavo, because Kerr and Cavo are part of the same umbrella, the Danaher company. And it's a very stiff, packable, really almost carvable composite.
Yeah.
I mean, unbelievably so.
Highly filled.
You couldn't put it in a CR syringe. You'd break the syringe or break the tip.
Yeah, it's highly
So you
filled.
put your foot on the rheostat, and this ultrasonic energy changes the consistency or the viscosity and takes this very dense, really great handling composite, makes it almost like a flowable. So you're backfilling, almost like doing a buildup. You let it set up for 5 seconds, and now you can carve or pack it. And it's got a 5 to 6 millimeter depth of cure, depending on what Kerr says or what
Yes.
other people, but I've never seen it less than 5, which
No,
is
as a
which
matter
is
of
very
fact,
cool.
as you know, talking to Mike Totola last
Right.
night, he's now working with Gordon at the CR newsletter and what used to be called CRA. Their work showed a 9 millimeter, as Mike announced last night, 9 millimeter depth of cure, which is just outrageous. And what people understand, and I think it's important, this is the marriage of physics and chemistry. Mm-hmm. This was why it was so much fun doing this thing. Let's step back a little bit. Composites have gotten really good.
Right.
I mean, the filler content, the smaller particles got smaller and smaller. We're down to nano now. We're up to the 80s as far as volume or weight percent, and 70s in volume percent in these things. So these products are great. We've got matricing that's going to give us a contact.
Right.
It's as predictable as tomorrow. Our adhesives have gotten, where they've gotten to.
Right.
But here we are, still lining, putting in liners, curing that, putting in 2 millimeter increments in an MOD. What are you putting in, like 50 or something? I mean, I'm joking now, of course, but you know how
25
much.
at least, right?
They're tedious, they're time consuming, they're exacting. The profit goes down as the more time that it takes you to do these things.
And
which
then
is
also dentists compromise. And
Well,
we
they do.
We are a profession that breeds a little bit of mediocrity. So
Yeah.
they start doing that and say, this isn't working for me. Let's bulk fill a
Bulk
material
fill
that's
it anyway.
not really designed to be bulk filled. So
you get early failures because they're not getting fully cured, because there's the problem with depth of cure, shrinkage stress. The bigger the bulk, it's not really the shrinkage stress. There's a little disagreement, quite a bit of disagreement on really bulk fill, whether it creates more shrinkage stress or in fact less. For Lewis did a study, and a number of people feel that the higher the volume, the less the shrinkage stress, because if you do it in layers, it adds up. But the layering technique, the validity of it was because we couldn't cure more than 2
Right.
millimeters.
It's the depth of cure.
And so you got a big old Hummer of an MOD, you are going to put in multiple layers. It is taking you time, it's taking you effort, it's exacting, because if you leave any gaps anywhere, then you've got problems. And like you said, dentists are under time pressures in their practice. Dentists have told me, and I'm sure they've told you this, and public doesn't know this, but I've had some dentists say, I can't do an MOD to composite and make a living. I'll crown that tooth instead of, and that's, but you can understand the insurance
Right.
reimbursement is nowhere near enough given the extra time and effort that it takes compared to an amalgam. And so, but patients don't want amalgams anymore. So
Right.
to give them tooth color, they do this. So anyway, back to the story. The question is, what we in the profession needed, because all the other parts were there, was a faster, easier way of placing these things.
Mm-hmm.
Enter bulk fill market.
Right.
Now the bulk fill market, in order to get there, it had to, what manufacturers had to do is they had to develop higher depth of cures, and in some cases that was development of a new photo initiator to add to it. Others, it was making it more translucent,
Right.
so that you could get better depth of cure. And then they split in two directions. One all basically used a flowable base, which was totally transparent and clear, but had a 4 millimeter depth of cure. So you fill up 4 millimeters of flowable material, but since that can't tolerate occlusal forces and you can't sculpt it and anything like that, then you put your traditional composite on top. And that works. That's definitely a shortcut. It definitely works. The science shows that. The other path was to develop the high viscosity material. But the problem with a very high viscosity material is it doesn't adapt well.
Right.
So you put your liner, your typical liner, and then you adapt that, and that works very well. As you know, as you just described, what sonic fill does, using sonic energy, high frequency vibration with rheologic modifiers, that's where one of the patents, this is in the rheologic modifiers, when you hit that with high frequencies vibration of a given amplitude and frequency, it drops the viscosity for about 87%, almost to a flowable. But there's another factor going on. It's not only going in as a flowable, it's vibrating. Now stop and think about this. How do we pour impressions? We mix
you
our
vibrate
stone,
on the stone.
and we put
Right.
we put our impression on a vibrator, and we vibrate the stone in there. Why do we vibrate the stone? To get total adaptation.
Right.
So not only have you got a low viscosity material going into the tooth, it's vibrating. So it's really becoming integrated into the surface, intimately, the surfaces of the cavity. You won't have voids. You'll have higher bond strength as well. Actually, there's science on that. And then, as you said, because it's vibrating and the physics also changes the way it cures, it actually gives it a higher depth of cure, and it gives you a lower shrinkage stress, because there's a slow modulus buildup. I don't want to get too technical on the science, because I know the folks will get bored. But I also know that a lot of dentists want to know how something works.
Right.
When we first launched this product, most dentists, including some lecturers, some well-known lecturers, said this can't work. We're now 4.5 years into it.
Yeah, that's amazing.
15 million restorations around the world. It's growing like crazy. One thing about dentists, if something doesn't work, they quickly realize it doesn't work.
Yeah.
And you don't get the growth, and you don't get that. So they knew before the science, but right now the science is coming in. I have a file that I want to give you of science on bulk fills and on sonic fill in particular, but bulk fills, because there's still dentists saying you can't put that much in, that won't work.
Right.
Well, they all work. I want to make that point.
I agree with you.
All the products work. I don't want to be too heavy on the sonic fill from that standpoint. They all work. All sonic fill does is it leapfrogged instead of 2 or maybe even 3 increments. It fills the whole thing in about 5 seconds.
Yeah.
With higher adaptation, and it just shortcuts everything.
Talking about the physics and the science. A lot of people will say, "Oh, I wish this was different or this was different." And I remember, early on, I was involved with you and
Yes.
sitting in a room a couple of years ago and saying, "Okay, Ron, this is what you need to do. You need to change the angle or make the tip, so I can move it around. You need to change the diameter of the tip." And you said, "No, we can't." All the rules change with the physics, and I didn't. I'm just thinking it's just the material in there
Yes.
that is all about the science.
It's
but
all
the
about the
angle
science.
and
And your help was really, really good, because we've known each other for so long, our thought patterns and everything, and your knowledge is so deep. I've always admired your work, your teaching, and working with you, and so you're such an educated fellow. And you gave some good information that day, and that was because we were working on Sonicville 2 at that stage, and your input was very valuable.
That was fun.
Yeah, it was
day.
fun. And I want to thank you in front of everybody for your help on that, and there were other people involved too. But you're exactly right. You see, the tip has to be vibrating along. We cannot lose any energy as it's exiting the tip. It has to get to the tooth with its full energy. So that interval and the diameter and the curvature, it was a fascinating project. It still is.
I bet. So did you, so you come up with this idea, and I'm sure the idea probably was initially, let's put sonic energy. It was like, how can we change the viscosity so I'm only using one material?
Yes.
Okay. So you went to Kerr?
Well, actually, no. It wasn't quite that way. By the way, you may recall vibrating, I don't know, way back we used to vibrate concept inlays down using our ultrasonic. I get mine from my hygienist room. I go get the ultrasonic scaler, put some cured composite on the tip so it wouldn't scratch it, put it on the inlay, because we didn't have luting resins.
Yeah, we didn't have good ones.
We'd have terrible ones, and they hadn't really been developed yet. So we used helium molar, also a restorative composite, stuck it in there, vibrated on. So the idea of vibrating and lowering viscosity, especially if you're going to do it under pressure, is not a new one. There. So Kerr was aware of that. So they actually came to me. That's how that worked.
Okay.
And they had this idea. They had parts of this idea. And when they came to me, they said, well, we've got our Cavo company, and is a division in Kerr, and we'd like to marry these companies together and develop something. We had no idea it could be done, because there's a specific parameter. There's parameters involved in this, but you have a goal. There's a specific handling characteristics and performance, and those are critical. And that's where they needed a dentist whose mind has been buried in composites for 20 years there, and actually working with their polymer chemists and their handpiece engineers. Truly was a team effort. I was the dentist involved in it, but I want to give total credit to that whole team that Kerr had, and they also just said, okay, it's done when it's done. We didn't know we could accomplish it when we started. They took a bit of a flyer, because we had to really discover some things. And I appreciate the opportunity that they gave me, and they're a wonderful company, as you know, and a lot of the dental companies, the major companies today, good companies, good products. Dentistry is progressing at a phenomenal rate, and it's all good for us and good for our patients.
Yeah, so you're talking about that's progressing so rapidly. And the change in the last 3 years is more than the last 7 years before that, which is more than the 20 years before that. Where would you see, if I describe the sonic fill of the future, not necessarily sonic fill, but where are we restoratively? And let's talk about direct, since that's kind of your baby right now. Where would you see, Sonicville 2 was just released, more highly polishable,
and wear resistance on Sonicville 2, it's reaching the limit now where it probably will wear less than amalgam. That's where we are now. That's incredible.
Yeah.
But the future? Well, the buzzword today in adhesive dentistry, whether it's through the adhesive, through the restorative. Oh, by the way, who knows? We may end up with a self-adhesive. Fully, we do have low viscosity self-adhesives. Actually, Kerr has one for T-Flow. But we don't have a self-adhesive restorative, and dentists would love to skip the adhesive step, because many still haven't gotten a total handle on it, although many have got it now and doing well with it. So there's a possibility there. I do think, though, bioactivity is the main buzzword. I would imagine every single company out there is working on that. As you know, we have a couple of bioactive materials, restorative materials. Biodentine is one, and there's a few others in cements. Ceramer and Biosem is one. And I mean, there's a few efforts into this bioactive field. Bioactive, by the way, maybe we should define it. What we would like to have is a material that's antimicrobial. Releases, I don't know, whether it be chlorhexidine, methylchlorine chloride, or some sort of quatermonium sort of thing. But and there's science behind this. But if we could have something that would be antimicrobial, we wouldn't have recurrent decay, even if your margins were open. Something like a glass ionomer, which has been the strength of those all along. The other thing is remineralization. So we need a material that will release calcium and phosphate ions in a way that we start to see some of the remineralization like we do with calcium silicate materials that are showing that bioactivity as well. So those are challenges. Those are not going to be easy because you still have to have stability in the material, but yet you want to have, and you can't have these two benefits without the release of some chemistry. Without breakdown of the material.
There's still a long way for us to go.
I think
really.
so.
You know, you look at it and say, how much better can these materials be? I mean, these are things that can make these better. And, you know, it's about lasting longer.
Well,
it's so our dentistry lasts longer for
exactly.
our patients' benefit.
Exactly. You know, we're always looking for better things, and that's the nature of healthcare. That's why we're a science and profession. And,
where are you
exciting.
adhesively now? You know, you and I we're always total etchers, and where are you now? We haven't talked about this in a while.
Well, no, we haven't, and it's an interesting sort of thing, right, that we have going now with the universals coming out, which I'm still with. And here again, I have to say, you know, I'm a practicing dentist, 2 days a week. I'm still lecturing, although my lecturing schedule is tapering down. I'm not doing the hands-on courses like I used to. It's only just because of the age factor. I have the will, but I don't. The mind is willing, but the body is weak. So I'm doing less of that and just slowing the whole thing down. But the you know, when it comes to adhesion, you've got the universal adhesives. Maybe we'll just take a minute. I don't know how much time we have, but and spend time on that because those allow you to be a total etch or a self etch.
Right.
Or, of course, you can always selective etch. And the big question, with the exception of Kerr's Optibond XTR, I have to move that over here because it's a 2-bottle system.
Right.
All the others are 1-bottle system. And the question about the 1-bottle systems, which we've had the 1-bottle, you know, the one-step self-etch, so-called 7th generation. I'm not keen on using the term generations, but one-step self-etch, basically. Are these universals old wine in new bottles?
Right.
There's the question. And I see them being an advantage clinical-wise. So I see that they are an advantage over those one-steps more clinical-wise because they give you different ways of using them. But I'm not so sure. I haven't seen the science yet on whether or not they're permeable like the old one-step self-etchers were permeable. They had issues with that. They were overly hydrophilic. They weren't so good on etching enamel. Those products just weren't very good. They were really bad, and they got better, but they never reached the level, say, of an etch and rinse. You talk about a 3-step or what you would call 4th generation 3-step etch and rinse, which is always the gold standard.
Right.
When it comes to the self-etch, you had Clearfill SE, the 2-bottle 2-step self-etch, which was the gold standard, and I've got to see these products meet that. Having said that, I think the XTR, because it was the first one out, in fact, when it came out, I don't think they knew it was a universal.
Right.
It was just a better 2-step self-etch. Well, it actually etches enamel. And I'm always biased towards 2 bottles anyway. I have to, when I lecture, I tell everyone I'm biased. It's from my chemistry background. Right. I'm biased. I want to have a hydrophilic covered with a hydrophobic.
Right.
I don't like the hydrophilic and hydrophobic. It's like shampoo. I want my shampoo and my conditioner in 2 different bottles. I don't want them in the same one. So anyway, that's just a few ideas, a few thoughts.
Good. And that's the the 2 hats we always have to wear, right? When we talk about these single bottle systems, I draw this imaginary line in the floor and I say, okay, here I am as your friend, the dentist that wants easy, quick, efficient.
Yes.
And I think these systems are going to be awesome. Then I walk across this imaginary line and say, okay, here's me as an educator. I have no idea because we really don't have any long-term research.
No, we don't. That's
but,
what we are.
And so you got to trust. We have good relationships with people like Byung Soo and
Yes.
Carlos Munoz and
Yes.
people at Ivoclar and Dan Fisher. If they say it's good,
Yes.
you want to believe them, but also they've all had some strikeouts over the
Yes.
years too.
Yes.
But it's going to be interesting to see how that goes. And I think that, just like the Sonicville, taking something that was tedious, time-consuming, difficult, and yielded mediocre results for a lot of clinicians.
Sure.
Packing just MOD composite, using Toffelmeyers, we all did that, right? But I think that if we can get to a point where we have a resin, whether it be Sonicville or something else, it's easy to use,
Yes.
great wear resistance, great adaptability, and has a really good chemistry in it that will bond to 2 structure. And so, we want easy because we practice clinical dentistry, but we want predictability and we want performance.
Exactly. And then when we started at Sonicville, the first thing was, okay, faster, easier, without compromise.
Yeah.
And in fact, one thing we found out, and we were just looking faster and easier, high quality material, durable, all those factors you have to have. Great handling. We wanted to have that because that makes it faster just because you can shape it without stickiness and slumpiness. You don't have to fight the composite. But the thing we didn't know when we started this project, we were just trying to make it as good as the current ones out there in terms of its ability to stand up in the mouth. What we didn't know, it's actually better because the adaptability is far superior. It's incredible how it adapts to the cavity walls. That was the vibration aspect. We didn't know that until we got into it, and I began doing some restorations, and we began studying these restorations, and some researchers were working in laboratories, and they say, hey, you get a higher bond with this. If you put it in, not activated,
Right.
and test the bond strength to the dentin, you activate it, put it in, test the bond strength to the dentin, there's a 25% increase in bond strength. It's significant.
That is significant.
Yeah, it reinforces 2 structure even more. So you get, I could go on with the side benefits that in the beginning we didn't realize were going to be.
And it is you went into it blind, kind of. I wonder if this will work.
Yeah, because it hadn't been done before.
Yeah, that's awesome.
There, it was. It was one of the. I'm getting near the end of. I've got a lot of years left, hopefully, but the types of things that I've done in the past, I'm doing less of them in the future, and that's just nature taking over. But if I look back at this career, this was a highlight without a question in terms of the product development.
Well, the first time we talked about this, I could sense your enthusiasm.
Yeah.
You were excited about this.
Yeah.
And I've seen you excited about other things, but not like you were with
this one, it was a chance to, I think, be part of something that changed the way we've historically done things. Yeah. And it's good for dentists, and it's good for the patient.
Awesome. We're going to go ahead and wrap up. I call these treadmill podcasts.
Yes.
About 30 minutes. So our treadmill time is up, and we go take our shower. You hear the airplanes in the background. That's because we are live outside. And apologize, but it's a beautiful day and a beautiful morning with a great friend.
I just want to thank you for giving me this opportunity. I feel like instead of coffee, we ought to have a beer in front of us. But you know what I'm saying?
We can toast our coffee.
Can we toast our coffee?
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you, my
friend. Put a little
friend.
Bailey's in it. So you're not lecturing as much, but I know that people gain so much knowledge from you every time they hear you, and me included. How can they get a hold of Is your lecture schedule out there? You have a website or something?
Yeah, I have a website. It's www.ronjacksondds.com.
Okay.
And,
ronjacksondds.com.
ronjacksondds.com. And the lecture schedule's there. It's not as lengthy as it used to be. I still plan to continue for some time, just less. Instead of every week, I think once a month. And
every week gets a little tiring.
It gets a little
I'm
tiring.
still on that schedule,
yes.
unfortunately.
Well, you're younger than I am, and God bless you. I wished I could do it, but no, I'm going to do everything I've been doing in the past, and there's some more projects coming up,
Yeah,
and
good.
we'll continue to have fun. What a great profession we have.
It is.
Isn't it
And you've added
amazing?
so much, and we all appreciate that.
Well, thank you. So have you.
Yeah, well, this has been enjoyable. I hope you've enjoyed it. Check out our other podcasts, some of the videos. If you go to www.dentalup, all one word, .xyz, or you can go to iTunes, search Dental Up, all one word. Go to podcasts. We've done about 16 of these, and they're always good. I appreciate it, Ron.
My pleasure. Thanks,
All right,
David.
you have a great day.
Thank you.